Let's fork and modify this hello HTML example so that it creates circles on the screen with SVG. The first step is to click fork, and then here I can rename this or pick a new name for the fork, and I'll type here circles with SVG, and then click fork. And what this does is it makes a copy of that viz. That's what these programs are called in VizHub, vizzes. And so when you make a copy of it, it's a copy that you own and you can modify, and it exists under your account. So if you are following along, you can click on profile here to see a listing of your vizzes, and that's where it would appear. So you can get back to it later. But anyway, let's open up the editor. And this year is different than all the other years because now there's AI. There's generative artificial intelligence with large language models that can understand and write and manipulate code. So in order to stay ahead of the curve, I and you, if you're a student in my course, I've given you access to this VizHub tool. And you can use other AI tools too. There's a huge number of amazing tools out there. But this is kind of a minimal, simple AI code editing tool that doesn't even remember the conversation at this point. It just takes the code files in and a prompt, and it gives you updated code files out. So, and you're welcome to use this, by the way, in your assignments and in your projects. And I would highly encourage it. Anyway, let's get started. And it's got this cool voice dictation feature. So let me say here, remove the div that says hello HTML and add an SVG element inside of the HTML that contains several circles. Do not use D3. Okay. That's pretty good. Let's take a look at the files that got generated there. So here it is. This is exactly what I had in mind. And by the way, we can just ditch the styles and the JavaScript because the point of this one is just pure SVG. So let me delete those other files. Delete. And we don't even need this ID. And this is basically what I had in mind. There's the power of AI editing. So let me just talk about what's going on here. Inside the body, there is now a new element, an SVG element, scalable vector graphics. Vector graphics means instead of pixels, which is raster, it's vector, meaning we define the geometries that we want to appear, and then the SVG rendering engine that's built into the browser handles translating that into actual pixels that we see on the screen. Now with SVG, you really need to specify the width and the height, because if you don't, what happens is it gets cut off and it gets a default width and height, which you can see if you right click and say inspect. If you right click on anything and say inspect, click on this menu item inspect, that will open up the dev tools such that you can see and inspect these DOM elements. DOM is DOM, Document Object Model, and that's what this is here. You can see sort of the inner workings of VizHub too. It's in an iframe, so its whole thing is running in an iframe, which is like a page within a page. And then inside of that, we have this body with SVG and these circle elements. And you can see, I think this feature is so cool. When you hover over it in the DevTools, in this Elements tab, it will show you the bounding box of each of those things. So you can see very clearly This circle corresponds to the first circle, which is red. This circle is the blue circle, which is green, and so on. Or blue, and then green, orange, purple. That's how you can use inspect element. It's super, super useful. But then what's going on in here is that inside the SVG, there are multiple circle elements. And each circle element gets positioned based on its CX and CY attributes. I think that stands for center X and center Y. And you can play around with this, and you can see that an X coordinate of 0 means that it's up against the edge. And I'm noticing that there's kind of a problem here, which is that we're seeing the default margin of HTML. We can address that separately. But anyway, as X increases, the circle will move to the right. So if I say 10, you can see it moving over, or 40, it's moving over more. CY, on the other hand, a value of 0 puts it at the very top, which is different from in math, like in a graphing calculator, where an increase in Y goes up. In SVG coordinates, it's inverted. So as Y increases, like if I change this to 80, you can see that it'll go down the screen. And then there's the R attribute. And by the way, attribute is a specific term for these properties of these DOM elements. These are all attributes. The R attribute is the radius. So you can increase this to, say, 90. You see it's bigger, has a higher radius. And then finally, fill is the fill color. And we use here named colors, but you could just as well use hex color codes like hash FF0000, which is also red. And in VizHub, you get this neat color picker. So you can hold down Alt and then click on this to get a color picker, which will let you just change the color, get it just right. So that's our circles with SVG example. No D3, no CSS yet, no JavaScript. Just very basic introduction to the concept of SVG. Let me just quickly wrap up this one. I just want to clean it up a little bit, and I'll use the AI editing to do that. So let's say here, give the SVG element width 960 and height 500. There we go. We can see the diff. That's exactly what I wanted. And then now we have scroll bars because of that default margin. So let's say add some styles to remove the default margin from the HTML and also prevent scroll bars. So that's the diff, and you can see it added a style element, which is how you can do CSS directly in the HTML instead of pulling it in from a file. So we select the body, we set margin to be 0. Great, that overrides the default, which is like 4 or something, or 2. And then overflow hidden prevents the scroll bars from showing up. So now we have a nice clean SVG that fills our screen and we don't have any scroll bars. So finally, let me just improve on the aesthetics of this a little. We want to increase the aesthetic appeal of this. Please modify the existing circles and add a couple new circles only with HTML such that it uses pastel colors, has a wide variety of sizes, and spreads across the available space, both horizontally and vertically. Let's see how it does with this one. Oh, that's nice. But it changed the background too. Let me say try harder. Wow, it tried a little too hard. Let me try another model. There we go. That's about right. That's about right. Set the background to be white. Yeah, that's good. Make the colors a little bit darker. Increase the saturation of the colors. Okay, that completes our circles with D3 example. Just a brief recap of how this works. It's all in an index.html. We have some styles here that remove the default margin in the HTML and also remove the scroll bars. And then we have this SVG element with a width of 960 and a height of 500, which are the defaults in VizHub, sort of arbitrary based on the old blocks.org defaults. And then a bunch of circles with CX, CY, which is the coordinate for its center, the R, which is its radius, and then the fill, which is its color, to create a bunch of circles on the screen. And this is how you do it with just HTML. Next, we're going to recreate this using D3.